This whole warehouse, our community, our staff, all the videos you love, Foundation Disc Golf literally as a whole would not be there if it wasn't for this disc right here. This is the full story of how the Crystal Raptor literally saved Foundation. See, when Foundation started, we negotiated terms with manufacturers that, to be completely honest with you, we didn't understand. It was our understanding that we were getting stock discs shipped to us on a quote-unquote consignment deal that essentially meant we had forever to pay them back, or if it didn't work out, we could just ship them the disc back. What we actually had negotiated was what's called net 180, which was essentially meant from an invoice, you had 180 days to pay said invoice back. So the discs we were ordering as we were launching our company in March were all due in September. We found this out in July. So up to this point, our plan had been, in our head, relatively risk-free, because essentially what we were doing is every one disc we sold gave us enough money to pay the manufacturer back for that disc, and roughly enough, pretty close, to buy another one to replace it on our shelf. So we didn't really have a sense of urgency because this was essentially risk-free. We just, every disc we sold, replaced pretty much exactly, and by the end we were going to have a paid for inventory that was slightly smaller than the inventory we started with. So our cash flow was very tight, and then what made it even tighter was the fact that we had to pull some money out to live on. See, Foundation was none of our full-time thing, but we were dedicating a considerable amount of time, so we had to be paid for that somehow. As you can probably tell, this already started off as a bad idea and with no urgency to really pay the manufacturers back, because again, we didn't understand what we had negotiated and what we got ourselves into. You can understand why a little panic set in when we figured that out in July. I actually just found and pulled our some of our account statements from manufacturers from 2019, and it looks like, based on our payment history, that we owed roughly $25,000 in open invoices at this point. Now, judging from our payment activity, it seems that we had about 12 grand of that on hand. So that left $15,000 in open invoices that we owed to manufacturers that we just simply didn't have. So we were standing there with essentially two roads in front of us. Road A, we could essentially sell as much stock plastic as possible, take that money, pay off as much of the balance as we could on the invoices as they became due, and then per our agreement with manufacturers, we could just ship back our stock inventory to them for credit against these invoices, close up shop, and hopefully have a little bit of money left over to show for our 7 months of hard work at that point. Or option B was we could double down and risk basically everything in an attempt to save the company. Now, I have to be completely upfront with you here. I was against this idea from the beginning. But you see, at this time, Paul Macbeth was one of the owners of Foundation, and he had gotten his hands on a Crystal Raptor, obviously not this run, but one like it from somewhere, and he absolutely loved it, as did many of the Discraft pros at the time. And back then, Discraft allowed you, if you ordered a certain number of discs, to combine a like plastic and mold combo with restrictions, but you could combine those for a limited edition run. Now, the numbers have all changed since then, but I believe back then the minimum was around 500 discs that you had to commit to ordering in order to get your mold and plastic combo. So the idea was very simple, but rather risky. We were essentially going to order 500 of these bad boys that we didn't have the money to pay for, market them very hard with the hopes of selling out essentially the day they came in, and then use that money to pay not only for the Crystal Raptors, but the profit from that to also pay off at least a big chunk of our remaining invoices. But what could go wrong? At this time, we had never seen this many of one disc before, and we also had no clue the power of Paul's audience. So all we really knew was we needed to try to make sure as many people as possible knew this disc existed, with the hopes of selling them very quickly. Now, when I look back at our marketing plan, if you want to call it that, we didn't actually have it written out. I just still have some of the marketing assets we used and some of the videos that we put out. And by videos, I mean one singular. It's almost laughable. It's almost like knowing what I know today about marketing and promotion for discs and drops and stuff. You would almost think we didn't want this disc to sell, but I remember back then it felt like we were screaming from a mountaintop that we wanted everyone to know about this. In the end, it probably ended up being in our favor that we weren't the best at marketing a disc release yet, because like I said, we didn't know the power of Paul's fan base yet. And in the end, 500 discs was simply never enough. We released them on September 27th at 6 p.m. and we were sold out by September 27th at 6:01 p.m. Congrats, job done, right? This is a huge moment. This was awesome. But shortly thereafter, we realized that we were kind of in a little bit of a pickle, because you see, even with the lack of promotion we did, the demand for these things was so high that 500 discs, like I said, was just never enough. And this created a different problem where now our customer service email and phone numbers and everything were blowing up with people with animosity towards Foundation, ticked off, throwing allegations out there about protected carts, which we had never even heard of up to this point. But because our site didn't have them, people thought they had one in their cart that then got taken out, and they were frustrated by that. There were people alleging that we never even uploaded the disc, because by the time they refreshed the site at 6:01, the disc went from not being there to just being sold out. So they thought, oh, these things haven't even hit the site yet, when in all actuality they were already gone. So it sent us into a little bit of a panic, and my next step was basically to get on the phone with Discraft and be like, all right, here's our problem. What can we do about it? So by 6:30 p.m. that day, we had actually launched the pre-sale of the colored crystal Raptor. This was kind of our response, right? Because people wanted this for the collectability, sure, but a lot of people just wanted to get their hands on a crystal Raptor, period. They just wanted the flight, the feel, everyone was hyping it up. And so what we did was we took this disc, we made it colored instead of crystal clear, and then we also put a small Foundation script logo stamp on it just in the corner to differentiate, because some people wanted these as collector items. We didn't want to dilute the collector market, but we also wanted to make another release so that the people who were so upset could still get their hands on something. So by 6:30, we had that pre-sale up on the site. We let that pre-sale run for a few weeks and ended up selling 250 of them in the pre-sale, and then the remaining 50 of them on October 22nd through the 24th. That's when we uploaded it, and the 50 were gone by the 24th. So that was an additional 300 Crystal Raptors that had sold through that. Now with this second run, originally the ones we put on the site were pink and yellow, and we also had the idea to order some sick blacked out ones. So it was basically just like this disc, but blacked out for, I believe we were gonna hold them for Black Friday, but somewhere in all of the chaos, some type of mix-up happened, and the black ones got shipped to us actually blank. And I don't know what regulations are in place or weren't in place or whatever, but I just remember that for some reason they need to have some type of marking on them for us to sell them. So we called Discraft again, and I was like, hey, if Paul signs the middle of these, does that count? Will that differentiate these so that we can actually get these black ones moving? So we got the okay, and we had Paul sign the center of them in silver Sharpie. And again, we had 250 of them, and we took those and printed out certificate of authentication and numbered them 1 through 250, and actually dropped those on November 2nd, which was the final Crystal Raptor release. So November 2nd, we sold out of the 250 collectible, I believe we ended up calling them smoky Crystal Raptors, because they looked kind of sick. They were black with this like swirl in them. So at the end of the day, this brought our sales total from the Crystal Raptor to just over $25,000, which allowed us to have enough money to not only pay off the invoices we had stacked up from the Crystal Raptors, but also pay off essentially the remainder of our invoices to actually buy our inventory from all the manufacturers and stay in business. Now, retelling this story and pulling all of the data and accounts and everything from 2019 has been an absolute blast for me, because it honestly has been a little funny to look back and just see how far we've come in the last like 6 years of running this business, and how much we've learned along the way. And I'm sure 6 years from now, I'll be looking back at what we're doing right now with a similar feeling. But realistically, it's those super stressful times in business and in life that really push you and grow you the most. It's moments like that that really taught me the most about how to handle cash flow, how to handle negotiations with manufacturers, how to handle marketing, how to handle all of that. And all of that really led to what allowed us to build over the next 5-6 years, and it prepared us for the next seasons of cash flow issues and inventory management and stuff that we had no idea was coming down the pipeline with all of the growth and challenges that the COVID pandemic brought to not only disc golf, but to the business world and world in general. So moments like that actually push you and provide moments for opportunities for a lot of growth. So I'm actually thankful for that season in 2019 and the chaotic mess we got ourselves into through just honestly ignorance. I don't really know another way to put it. There's no reason we should have ever been in that situation. But now if you ever hear me talk about the Crystal Raptor, you know that I'm not joking around when I say this disc literally saved Foundation. So I'm gonna be making some more of these about other moments looking back at Foundation's history up to this point that I've never really documented, never shared the in-depth story of. So comment down below if there's any you can think of. But if not, be sure to stay tuned and I'll have another one posted here soon.